Good morning. Thank you so much, Flora and Anne-Marie, for kind of coordinating all this. Hello there. What if I started off by saying that the average adult in the UK, probably the average adult in this room, spends 22 hours of each day inside? We were just talking about paediatric cases. What if I tell you that the average under 18 in the UK spends less time out of doors than the average prisoner in the UK? We've got some quite shocking statistics here. Oh, there we go. The tech works. Wonderful stuff. All of these numbers, as you probably might imagine, are distinctly worse for people living with all sorts of long-term health conditions, but particularly people who've experienced a brain injury. There's research out there right now that suggests that 1 in 4 people post-stroke don't take a single step each day that they don't have to functionally. That's a real shame. And I'm up here today in this quite large room, I have to say, to try and change that. So my name's Rob Smith, and I am over here from Calvert Reconnections as senior rehab coach. I've talked to a whole bunch of people already this morning. I've talked to a lot of professionals in the brain injury world. I've talked to a lot of physios, talked to a lot of OTs, a lot of people with a background in psychology. I'm a little bit different. Everything that kind of got me here today was around rock climbing, mountaineering, and kayaking. So I just feel really, really honoured to be up here today, sharing the stage with the other speakers, being up here after a kind of consultant clinical psychologist. I mean, wow, thank you, Liam. I might actually find you later on if you've got any input on imposter syndrome. That might be great.
If you can get me outdoors more, that's a deal.
We have a deal. Wonderful. But anyway, I am out here today from Calvert Reconnections. As far as we know, please correct me if I'm wrong, the UK, if not Western Europe's only residential rehabilitation centre for people post-brain injury that focuses its approach on the outdoors, an outdoor adventure. So it kind of makes sense that I'm pretty passionate about taking rehab outside. I could probably spend the remainder of my time up here listing the benefits of heading outside for people working as professionals, for people who've experienced a brain injury, and for the world over. But we'll get to all of that in a minute. If we're talking about adventure, I think first of all, we kind of need to define what we're talking about here. Adventure's a huge concept, but I think we can make it really simple. We always know when someone has been out there and had an adventure, because they'll tell you about it. Without question, that individual will come and seek you out, and they'll tell us exactly what was hard. They'll tell us about exactly the time they imagined giving up. They'll tell us about exactly how they felt when they got through that experience and grabbed the goal that they were after. There's plenty of other organisations out there who've spent a bit of time defining adventure. The top one up there, I've got my little laser pointer, hello, that is from the British Army, talking about adventurous training. They define that as something that takes an individual out of their comfort zone, something that gives them leadership strategies, coping strategies, and decision-making skills. The bottom one is from a fantastic charitable organisation called the Outward Bound Trust. They've been taking people out of doors for the last 80 years, developing skills, be that professional, personal, etc., etc. And they talk about opportunities to respond to challenges and uncertainty in new or unpredictable environments. Now, from a brain injury perspective, I find that really, really interesting, because what both of these organisations kind of have in common with their definitions there, and what myriad other organisations are kind of saying as well, is all of the gains from heading outside and having an adventure are really, really generalisable. And that completely makes sense, doesn't it? Because if we take our army definition, we don't expect soldiers on the battlefield to be suddenly confronted with a canoe slalom. And equally, the, I don't know, aerospace engineers coming through the Outward Bound Trust aren't suddenly going to find themselves up against an engineering conundrum that you can only solve with rock climbing skills. It's about the carryover from what we experience when we're out of doors. It's about building self-belief, self-efficacy that makes all of these things so worthwhile. So my question to the room today and to the wider world, that if so many other organisations can see the benefits and the wins from heading outdoors more often, more purposefully, is the rehab world missing a little bit of a key tool from its toolbox? Well, actually, in some areas, we're kind of already making a start here. A few of our psychological colleagues in the room probably very familiar with cognitive behavioural therapy and this idea of behavioural activation. Quite simply, getting more people to do more things more of the time and tracking how that impacts their mood. Already we're starting thinking about getting people active, getting people out there. And then, probably more recently, we're starting to see, particularly south of the border where I'm based, more and more of what we call social prescribing. Sorry, these slides have come out absolutely terribly, haven't they? But this idea of people being kind of directed by clinical services into non-clinical services to bolster their well-being, to bolster their physical fitness, to kind of put them in situations where they can thrive without needing to be surrounded by white walls and exercise balls. It's a really simple recipe. Going outside more often, more purposefully, has got tangible, measurable benefits to people's well-being. So, with all of this in mind, we can't talk about going outside more often in 2023 and not reference the COVID pandemic, really. I'm sorry. There are very, very few positives from that, really. But one of those very few positives was a huge uptick in daily outdoor activity across the UK. And I'm sure many people in this room maybe had their kind of lockdown walk, their COVID walking route. Yeah, I hope a few of us have kind of kept hold of those as well. There's a huge uptick in that across the country, across the world, and that started to attract the attention of researchers, academics, and right now, outdoor geeks like myself are living in this kind of verifiable golden age of research into the effect of frequent, low-intensity exposure to outdoor environments. A lot of that is focused around this idea of spending time in green spaces, and blue spaces is the parlance of this, but quite simply in non-urban environments. So that might be forests, it might be meadows, it might be the coastline, it might be the riverside, the lake, etc., but deliberately putting oneself into an environment where you're somewhere different to home. Now, with all of that, time spent in these environments has been measured and correlated against a range of symptoms that we see across the general population, but also we very often see post-brain injury. So with that in mind, more time spent deliberately in green and blue spaces was associated with a reduction in depressive symptoms. And interestingly, that was with people who have got a clinical diagnosis of depression, and also in people who don't have that clinical diagnosis, but like many of us, simply live with the ebb and flow of managing one's daily well-being. Exactly the same thing happened with people who suffer from symptoms of anxiety. Be that in people who are kind of diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, or people who don't have a diagnosis of an anxiety disorder, but again have to kind of cope with the day-to-day. Spending time deliberately, deliberately is an important term here, we're not saying go stand in the woods, you'll be great, but spending time deliberately in these spaces from a well-being perspective has increased self-reported life satisfaction. There's a load of research to do unpacking what that means, but right now, all we're seeing is positives. Now, the really, really interesting bit of research here kind of correlated, well, does this work If we live in these environments, does this work? If we visit these environments, because all of a sudden then we've got this disparity, haven't we? For lucky people like me who happen to live down in the Lake District, well, my well-being is going to be off the chart. I'm surrounded by this stuff. For those poor folks who are kind of stuck in a one-bedroom apartment in the middle of the city, then all of a sudden you've got a paucity of all of these good things. The really interesting thing that came out of this research is no, you get exactly the same effects, you get exactly the same carryover from deliberately visiting these environments as much as you do from living in these environments. In fact, some studies even showed that by taking the time to put yourself in these places, as a matter of course, it's not just something that's happening, you're making the effort to kind of get out there and go and be in these places, we're going to see a better carryover into your well-being by the very fact that you're choosing to do that rather you're there anyway. So if we look at all of these findings, I honestly don't think that the world of rehab in brain injury can afford to kind of not look at the outdoors as a treatment modality. With all of that in mind, there's not a huge amount of evidence that directly brings brain injury and the outdoors together. And it makes sense, doesn't it? We've got an underrepresented, under-researched and underfunded group of individuals put next to an underrepresented, underfunded and under-researched intervention. There's not a lot of information out there. So we as Calvert Reconnections started to gather our own. We as an organisation work with people residentially, post-brain injury. We put all of our interventions, as many as we can anyway, out there through the medium of outdoor activity. So we're out rock climbing with physiotherapists. We're out there kind of planning days in the mountains with OTs. We're doing walk and talks with clinical psychologists. The best one I ever saw, a speech and language session, gorge scrambling up a river, clarity of speech, water crashing down everywhere. Wow. Anyway, we've worked with people over the last 3 years with really outdoor-specific interventions through kind of more standard clinical specialties. And it's really hard to track the effects of those things in a very specific way. Of course, there's a place for kind of, measuring someone's degree of elbow flexion or someone's visuospatial awareness, if that's important to that person. But it doesn't give you a good whole picture. For the professionals in this room, if you're looking to kind of measure the almost unmeasurable, take a look at the IROC. I believe it was developed not a million miles away from here. It was up in Scotland. It's absolutely amazing outcome measure for having a look at someone's global well-being, and it kind of tracks all of these different areas of well-being into a bunch of different zones. People can kind of have a look at that either as we use it on admission to an organisation, discharge from the organisation. We can kind of do that as a weekly tracker. We can get people to a place where they can use this tool independently. I would recommend it to the world, but I'm not here to say that. I'm here to say that our blue splodge is our admission score, our green splodge is our discharge score. This is all from just purely putting as many interventions out there as we can over an average of a 3-month stay, getting people out, about, active in the outdoors as a brain injury cohort. We've got some incredible results there, and some results that we absolutely didn't expect. We kind of thought we'd get that carryover into the mental health domains. We kind of thought we'd get that carryover into exercise, activity, physical health, all the things that you might expect. But actually, other things came along as well. People were reporting a real boost in the kind of purpose in life, the direction in life post-injury. People were reporting a massive uptick in the kind of social inclusion because, unsurprisingly, if we're going out rock climbing, canoeing, all of these things, it takes a team to make it work. I think we've got an absolute ace in the hole here as a rehab world to start using some things that really, really engage people. We all in this room know the statistics regarding kind of poor mental health outcomes after a brain injury. We know the number of people who lose their purpose, lose the direction, and maybe turn towards some more unhealthy coping mechanisms following an injury. With that in mind, this idea of purposeful outdoor activity really is a secret weapon. An individual plans a trip to the local coastline. They access it via public transport, train, bus, whatever it might be. They get out there, they follow a signposted walking trail around the sand dunes, around the village, whatever it may be, and they go off and they order a coffee afterwards. Potentially, that person just targeted a bunch of goals set by occupational therapy, physiotherapy, speech and language therapy, and clinical psychology. We can repeat that, we can measure that, we can grade it up, we can grade it down, we can make it easier, harder. We can get huge carryover into someone's overall mental well-being. It's all for the price of a bus fare. We can't afford to miss this trick, guys. So here is my challenge to everyone in this room. Whether you've lived through a brain injury yourself, whether you're a person who works professionally supporting those with brain injury in whatever your role might be, my challenge to you, find an opportunity this week to go and have an adventure. And hopefully we've got a flavour of what that means now. It means somewhere new to you. It means somewhere or something out of your comfort zone and something that you can't wait to tell others about how it went. Don't just let it happen. Take time to explore how it makes you feel. Make it purposeful. Make it meaningful. Think about how it changes your mood. And if it feels good, keep going. Build those habits. Just like we did through the COVID pandemic, daily walks, build those positive habits. If you're a professional working with those who suffered ABI, challenge yourself to bring in a little bit more adventure into your interventions. Now, sure, that's probably going to involve writing a couple more risk assessments. But when you write that risk assessment, you're going through those columns of all the terrible things that might go wrong, that might possibly hit by lightning, all of these things. When you've finished all of those bits, please do yourselves a favor, right at the bottom, add another column, and into that column, add what could go right, what could be the difference if we kind of stretch ourselves, push ourselves, and do something new, do something different, do something adventurous. So you might have picked up on this, but I'm pretty passionate about the concept of using the outdoors as a tool for better rehab more of the time. If people have got some questions, I'm going to be around all day on the Calvert Reconnections store. Feel free to catch me over there. Feel free to catch me after this because I'm just a little bit ahead of time. Before I go, I just want to say a massive thanks to the Digby Brown team for making these happen. I was right there last year. I was here as a delegate, and to be up here now, it just feels absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time to come along and listen. Get yourself out there. Have an adventure. Hope to see you out there, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you.